The obsidian citadel hung in the void like a twisted crown of dark metal, its spires reaching across 17 kilometers of reinforced crystalline armor. For 3,000 years, it had been the ultimate symbol of galactic power and impenetrable fortress that housed the Council of Ascended. Being so evolved, they had transcended physical form centuries ago. No weapon had ever scratched its surface, no fleet had ever breached its shields. The very concept of assault was considered theoretical. Madness. Commander Reeves drifted in his modified scout vessel, hidden in the shadow of a dead moon, studying the readings that made no sense. The fortress's energy signatures were impossible defensive grids that could obliterate entire star systems, gravity wells that could crush planets, and at its heart, something that registered as pure antimatter contained in a shell of crystallized time itself. Deathworlders, he whispered to himself, testing the word that had become legend. The galaxy spoke of them in hushed tones, mythical beings from worlds so hostile that survival alone required godlike resilience. Planets where the very air was poison, where gravity could crush starships, where the indigenous life forms were walking nightmares. Most species believed them to be cautionary tales, warnings about the dangers of unchecked evolution. But Reeves had seen the classified files. He knew the truth that the galactic powers had buried for millennia. Deathworlders were real, and they had built the Obsidian Citadel as their ultimate sanctuary. The Council of Ascended weren't evolved beings, they were the last survivors of races that had conquered death itself through pure, brutal adaptation. His communication ray crackled with an encrypted message from Earth Command. The orders were simple and suicidal: infiltrate the Citadel, gather intelligence on Deathworlder technology, and return with data that could level the playing field in humanity's desperate war against the Hegemony Alliance, the same alliance that had been trying to crack the Citadel's secrets for 3 millennia. Reeves examined his equipment one final time. Standard human military gear, enhanced with the best technology Earth's struggling colonies could provide. Against beings that had literally conquered death, it seemed pathetically inadequate. His pulse rifle used magnetic acceleration to fire depleted uranium rounds at near-light speed. His armor could withstand direct plasma strikes and maintain life support in hard vacuum. His neural implants gave him reaction times measured in microseconds. By galactic standards, he was already superhuman. By Deathworlder standards, he was probably an insect. The Citadel's patrol drones swept past his position, sleek constructs of living metal that moved with predatory grace. Each one was the size of a frigate, armed with weapons that could sterilize continents. They registered his presence for a nanosecond, classified him as insignificant debris, and continued their eternal patrol. Reeves smiled grimly. That was humanity's one advantage, being consistently underestimated. While the galaxy's great powers waged war with fleets of dreadnoughts and planet-killing superweapons, humans fought with cunning, adaptation, and an apparently genetic inability to recognize impossible odds. He fired his ship's engines and began his approach to the Citadel. Somewhere in its dark heart, beings that had transcended mortality itself waited in their perfect fortress, secure in the knowledge that nothing in the universe could threaten them. They had never encountered a human before. The Citadel's outer defenses were a masterwork of paranoid engineering, energy barriers that existed in folded space, sensor networks that monitored 17 different dimensions simultaneously, and automated defense systems that could respond to threats before they were even fully materialized. Reeves watched his ship's instruments go haywire as he approached the first perimeter, reality itself seeming to bend around the fortress's gravity manipulation fields. What the Deathworlders hadn't anticipated was humanity's greatest weapon: absolute, suicidal persistence combined with creative problem-solving born from a species that had evolved under constant threat. Instead of trying to fight the Citadel's defenses, Reeves embraced them. He shut down his ship's engines and let the gravity wells capture him, programming his vessel to tumble like debris while he suited up for Eva. As the automated systems prepared to incinerate what they assumed was space junk, he ejected from the rear maintenance hatch, using the ship's destruction as cover for his approach. The explosion lit up the void for precisely 3.7 seconds, before the Citadel's matter conversion fields reduced the debris to constituent atoms. In that brief window, Reeves used his suit's emergency thrusters to attach himself to the underside of a patrol drone, his armor's adaptive camouflage matching the living metal's bioluminescent patterns. For 6 hours, he rode the drone through the Citadel's patrol routes, mapping the fortress's structure and learning its rhythms. The patrol drones followed patterns of mathematical perfection, their routes optimized for maximum coverage with zero redundancy. It was the kind of flawless system that can only be designed by minds that had spent centuries perfecting the art of defense. It was also predictable to a fault. When the drone passed through a maintenance airlock in the fortress's lower levels, Reeves detached and rolled behind a collection of what appeared to be repair equipment. The Citadel's interior was a marvel of dark beauty, walls of living crystal that pulsed with inner light, corridors that curved through impossible geometries, and everywhere the sense of ancient, patient intelligence. His first encounter with a Deathworlder came without warning. The being materialized from the shadows like a living nightmare 3 meters tall, with crystalline skin that reflected the ambient light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Its form shifted constantly, solid matter becoming pure energy and back again. As if it existed in multiple states simultaneously, the creature paused, its attention focused on something only it could perceive. When it spoke, its voice resonated through dimensions Reeves couldn't fully comprehend, a sound like dying stars given voice. Impossible, it said in perfect standard galactic, though its mouth never moved. A warm blood. Here, in the Citadel Eternal, Reeves remained perfectly still. His armored stealth systems pushed to their absolute limits. The Deathworlder circled his position, its form becoming more solid as it focused, revealing features that seemed carved from nightmare itself. Too many eyes, too many angles. A face that suggested vast intelligence, coupled with complete disregard for biological limitations. You carry the scent of soul, the creature continued, its voice now carrying overtones of curiosity. The yellow star that birthed the legend makers. But that is impossible. The Terrans are myth. Stories told to frighten young races into believing in Deathworlders. The irony was perfect. Here, in the fortress of beings that the galaxy considered mythical, he had become the myth himself. The Deathworlder's attention shifted to something else, and it began to fade back into the shadows. As it disappeared, Reeves heard its final words. The Conclave must be informed. If Terrans are real, then the old prophecies require reconsideration. Alone again, Reeves continued deeper into the Citadel, carrying with him the knowledge that humanity's reputation had preceded them even here. In this place beyond the reach of normal space, the deeper levels of the Citadel defied every law of physics. Reeves understood. Corridors folded back on themselves, creating passages that were simultaneously horizontal and vertical. Gravity shifted without warning, and in some chambers, time itself moved differently. He watched maintenance drones complete their tasks in slow motion, while his chronometer insisted that hours were passing in seconds. The Deathworlders had built their fortress not just in three-dimensional space, but across multiple layers of reality itself. His neural implants struggled to process the sensory input as he navigated the maze-like structure. The Citadel was alive in ways that went beyond simple artificial intelligence. It was a hybrid of technology and biology, matter and energy, past and future woven together into something that existed outside normal causality. In the central nexus, he found what he was looking for, the Conclave Chamber, where the Council of Ascended made their decisions. The chamber was a sphere of pure crystallized space, suspended in a void that registered on his instruments as absolute zero, not just cold, but the complete absence of energy itself. Inside the sphere, 5 beings waited in contemplation. They had long ago abandoned fixed physical forms, existing as patterns of conscious energy that could assume any shape they desired. As Reeves watched from the shadows, they debated in languages that predated most star systems, their conversation shifting between dimensions of meaning that his translation software couldn't begin to parse. But one word came through clearly, repeated in a dozen different conceptual frameworks: human. The eldest of the beings of presence that radiated age measured in geological epochs, finally spoke in standard galactic. The signs are unmistakable. The Terran probe form has infiltrated our sanctuary. The question is not how we know their reputation for persistence. The question is why. Another presence, this one crackling with barely contained energy, responded with what might have been amusement. Perhaps they have finally evolved beyond their primitive phase. It would be interesting to test their worthiness. You forget the prophecy of the last war, the eldest replied. When the Deathworlders of Soul breached the Citadel Eternal, the age of transcendent sense, the galaxy returns to chaos, and the great cycle begins anew. Reeves felt his blood turn to ice. They weren't just aware of his presence, they had been expecting it. Humanity's infiltration of the Citadel wasn't a tactical victory. It was the fulfillment of an ancient prediction. The third being, a swirling vortex of dark matter giving consciousness, spoke with the voice of gravity itself. The Terran carries weapons of crude matter, devices that function through simple chemical reactions and magnetic fields. Its thought patterns show typical mammalian stress responses to danger. By our standards, it is little more than an intelligent animal, and yet, the eldest observed, it is here, in the place that has stood inviolate for 3,000 years. Either our defenses have failed completely, or this intelligent animal possesses capabilities we have failed to consider. The fourth being remained silent, but Reeves could feel its attention like a physical weight. When it finally spoke, its voice carried the sound of dying worlds. The Terran's neural patterns are unusual. It shows no fear of death, only determination to complete its mission. Its physiological responses suggest it has accepted the impossibility of survival, yet continues to function at peak efficiency. Ah, the eldest said, and now there was definite amusement in its voice. I see. The Terran is not here as a spy or saboteur. It is here as a weapon that has chosen to sacrifice itself for the chance to gather intelligence on our capabilities. The fifth being spoke for the first time, its voice like the whisper of entropy itself. If that is true, then we face a species that has weaponized self-sacrifice. They have turned their own mortality into a tactical advantage in the darkness. Reeves smiled. They understood humans better than most species, but they still didn't get it completely. He wasn't here to die for intelligence. He was here to prove that nothing in the galaxy was truly invincible. Not even the legendary Deathworlders themselves. The attack came without warning. The chamber's walls dissolved into pure energy as the five beings of the conclave focused. Their combined will on the space where Reeves hid, matter converted to plasma. Plasma became exotic particles, and exotic particles twisted into configurations that shouldn't exist in normal space. Time. Reeves was already moving. His neural implants had been processing the energy buildup for nanoseconds before the attack materialized, and his enhanced reflexes carried him through a dimensional fold in the chamber wall. Just as reality exploded behind him, he emerged in a corridor that hadn't existed moments before. His armor sensor screaming warnings about radiation levels that should have been instantly fatal. The Deathworlders weren't trying to kill him, they were testing him, pushing him to see how far human adaptation could go when faced with impossible conditions. They were about to find out. The corridor became a maze of death, each turn presenting new impossibilities. Gravity reversed, sending him tumbling through acid rain that fell upward. The air became pure chlorine gas, then methane, then something that registered on his suit's sensors as conceptual poison, a substance that attacked the very idea of biological existence. His armor held, its adaptive systems working overtime to compensate for conditions that violated the basic principles of chemistry. The Deathworlders had built their tests around the assumption that even the most resilient species had limits. They had never encountered something that had evolved on a world where the impossible was simply Tuesday. Earth hadn't been humanity's first home, it had been their proving ground, a planet where the dominant species had to overcome ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and a dozen extinction events just to reach the Stone Age. By the time humans developed space travel, they had been conditioned to treat galactic-level catastrophes as minor inconveniences. The maze deposited him in a chamber that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The Deathworlders waited for him there, their forms now solid and imposing. The eldest had assumed the shape of living diamond, its faceted surface reflecting light that contained colors beyond the visible spectrum. The others had taken forms that suggested vast, alien intelligence geometries that hurt to perceive directly, arrangements of matter that implied knowledge of fundamental forces unknown to conventional physics. Impressive, the eldest said, its voice now carrying harmonics that resonated through multiple dimensions. You have survived the trials of impossibility, but survival is only the first test. Now we measure your worth as a warrior. The second being stepped forward, its form shifting from pure energy to crystallized time. We offer you a choice, Terran. Submit to our examination, and we will grant you knowledge that will elevate your species beyond their current limitations. Resist, and face the consequences of challenging beings who conquered death itself. Reeves removed his helmet, breathing air that his instruments insisted was pure poison. His enhanced metabolism converted the toxic compounds into harmless waste products. Another gift from humanity's hellish evolutionary journey. I choose option 3, he said. raising his pulse rifle. I'm going to break your fortress, steal your secrets, and prove to the galaxy that even gods can bleed. The Deathworlders exchanged glances that conveyed millennia of shared experience. Then, slowly, they began to laugh, a sound like the birth of stars and the death of planets, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Now, the eldest said, its diamond form beginning to glow with inner fire. Now you begin to understand why we have waited so long for your species to find us. The galaxy grows stagnant under the rule of those who have forgotten struggle. It needs chaos again. It needs war. It needs humans. Reeves finished. Indeed. But first, young Deathworlder, you must prove that you are worthy of the chaos you will unleash. The fight began in 17 dimensions and quickly escalated beyond the boundaries of conventional space-time. The eldest Deathworlder attacked first, its crystalline form fracturing into 1,000 shards of living diamond, each one capable of cutting through the quantum foam that held reality together. Reeves moved like lightning, his enhanced nervous system processing the multi-dimensional assault and responding with purely human instinct. Where the Deathworlders fought with the precision of immortal beings who had perfected combat over millennia, he fought with the desperate creativity of a species that had learned warfare from natural selection itself. His pulse rifle fired rounds that shouldn't have been able to exist in the warped physics of the chamber. But humanity's weapons had been designed by engineers who had given up on the word impossible. Around the same time, they figured out how to build starships using nothing but spite and recycled aluminum. The depleted uranium rounds punched through the eldest's diamond form, each impact sending cascades of crystalline fragments across dimensions that didn't have names. The being reformed instantly, but for a microsecond, Reeves had heard something that claimed to be beyond physical damage. The second Deathworlder joined the battle, its time-crystallized form moving through past and future simultaneously. It attacked Reeves with weapons that struck before they were fired, defenses that blocked attacks he hadn't made yet. The temporal warfare should have been impossible to counter. How do you fight an enemy that knows your every move before you make it? The answer, as it turned out, was to make moves so stupid that even precognitive beings couldn't predict them. Reeves threw away his rifle and charged the Time Wielder with nothing but his combat knife and the kind of tactical insanity that had made humans the galaxy's most feared hand-to-hand combatants. The Deathworlder's temporal senses registered the attack coming from 17 different possible futures, each one more suicidal than the last, but it couldn't register which one was real because Reeves himself didn't know. He was improvising on a level that defied precognition, making decisions so fundamentally irrational that they existed outside the boundaries of deterministic prediction. The combat knife, a simple piece of sharpened metal that any civilized species would have abandoned for energy weapons centuries ago, punched through the Time Wielder's crystallized form and found something vital. The being screamed across multiple dimensions as its carefully maintained temporal matrix collapsed, dumping it back into normal causality for the first time in millennia. The third Deathworlder, the vortex of conscious dark matter, attacked with gravitational forces that should have compressed Reeves into a singularity. Instead, he activated his armor's emergency systems and rode the gravity well like a surfer riding a tsunami, using the Deathworlder's own weapons against it. His armor's power core overloaded in a cascade of exotic particles, creating a brief but intense electromagnetic pulse that disrupted the dark matter being's coherence. For a moment, one of the most powerful entities in the galaxy flickered like a bad hologram, and in that moment of vulnerability, Reeves struck with the last trick in humanity's arsenal, pure, undiluted audacity. He grabbed the destabilized dark matter form and used his armor's failing containment fields to compress it into a makeshift grenade. The explosion tore through the chamber's dimensional barriers, sending shockwaves across 17 layers of reality. When the chaos settled, 3 of the 5 Deathworlders were down, their forms damaged but not destroyed. The remaining 2, the Gravity Voice 1 and the Entropy Whisper, stood in the wreckage of their perfect chamber, looking at the blood-soaked human who had just accomplished the impossible. Magnificent, the Gravity Voice being said, its words carrying the weight of collapsing stars. You fight like the universe itself, chaotic, unpredictable, absolutely destructive to everything that tries to impose order upon it. The Entropy Whisper stepped forward, its form becoming more solid as it focused its attention. We have tested 1,000 species over the millennia. None have ever damaged the Citadel Eternal. None have ever harmed the Ascended Council. You are the first to prove that transcendence is not the end of evolution, it is merely another beginning. Reeves spat blood and raised his combat knife. I'm not done yet. The eldest Deathworlder, its diamond form slowly regenerating, laughed with something approaching genuine delight. No, young Chaos Bringer, you are just getting started. The battle's aftermath revealed the Citadel's true nature as the dimensional barriers collapsed. Reeves found himself standing in a vast chamber that stretched beyond the horizon, filled with the preserved history of 1,000 dead civilizations. The Deathworlders weren't just survivors, they were collectors, keepers of the galaxy's evolutionary legacy. Every species that achieves true Deathworlder status faces the same choice. The eldest explained, its diamond form now showing cracks that pulse with inner light. Transcend their physical limitations and join us in eternal contemplation, or remain bound to flesh and eventually fade into extinction for 3,000 years. We have waited for a species capable of making a third choice. Reeves examined the vast archives surrounding them. Holographic displays showed the rise and fall of galactic empires, the birth and death of species that had touched the stars before humanity had even discovered fire. In every case, the pattern was the same. Evolution reached a plateau, stagnation set in, and eventually entropy won. Your gardeners, he realized, you've been cultivating the galaxy, waiting for something to break the cycle. The gravity voice being nodded, its form rippling with approval. Every 1,000 years, we see new conflicts, introduce new challenges, force the surviving species to adapt or die. But adaptation has limits when existence becomes too comfortable. The galaxy has grown soft under the protection of the Hegemony Alliance, which is why, the Entropy Whisper added, we allowed your species to find us. Humans represent something we had thought impossible, a Deathworlder species that refuses to transcend. You have chosen to remain mortal, to embrace struggle, to weaponize your own limitations. The fourth Deathworlder, the one that had remained silent during their earlier conversation, finally spoke. Its voice carried the sound of newborn stars, hope mixed with terrible potential. The other galactic powers see humanity as a threat to be contained or destroyed. They cannot understand that you are evolution's answer to stagnation itself. Reeves felt the pieces falling into place. You've been manipulating the war against the Hegemony Alliance. You want us to win. Win, the eldest laughed, a sound like crystal breaking across dimensions. Young Deathworlder, we want you to do far more than win. We want you to break the galaxy so thoroughly that it has no choice but to evolve again. The chamber's walls became transparent, revealing the true scope of the Citadel. It wasn't just a fortress, it was a weapon capable of reshaping reality itself. The Deathworlders had spent millennia building not just defenses, but tools for fundamental change. The choice is yours, the eldest continued. Take this knowledge back to your species. Use it to defeat the Alliance, and in doing so, force every surviving civilization to adapt to a new reality, or join us in transcendence, and watch as the galaxy slowly dies in its own perfection. Reeves looked at the offered power technology that could make humanity the dominant force in the galaxy, weapons that could crack planets, defenses that could stop entire fleets. It was everything his species needed to not just survive, but to rule. There's a third option, he said finally. I take the knowledge, but I don't use it to conquer. I use it to level the playing field, make every species dangerous again, force them all to remember what it means to fight for survival. The Deathworlders exchanged glances that conveyed volumes of wordless communication. Then, slowly, they began to smile, expressions that somehow managed to be both terrifying and beautiful. Now, the eldest said, now you understand why we chose humanity. You don't want to rule the galaxy, you want to save it from itself. The Entropy Whisper stepped forward, its form solidifying into something almost recognizable as humanoid. But first, young Chaos Bringer, you must survive what comes next. The Alliance has detected your infiltration. They are coming with everything they have, convinced that destroying the Citadel will eliminate the Deathworlder threat forever. Through the transparent walls, Reeves could see the approaching fleet, 1,000 ships of the line, dreadnoughts capable of sterilizing solar systems, all converging on their position with the desperate fury of civilizations that had finally realized they were facing extinction. Good, he said, checking his weapons. I was getting bored. The Alliance fleet arrived like a plague of metal locusts, their combined firepower enough to crack moons and boil oceans. Admiral Korath, commanding from the bridge of the Super Dreadnought, Eternal Dominion, watched his tactical displays with satisfaction. 3,000 ships had converged on the Obsidian Citadel, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. All ships, commence bombardment, he ordered. Full spread, maximum yield. I want that fortress reduced to constituent atoms. The initial salvo should have been enough to destroy anything short of a small planet, antimatter, torpedoes, quantum, disruptors, and gravitational implosion devices struck the Citadel's shields in a cascade of destruction. That lit up the void like a newborn star. The shields held. Impossible, Korath breathed. Nothing could withstand that level of. His words were cut off as the Citadel responded. But instead of the expected counterattack, something far more disturbing happened. The fortress began to change. The dark metal of its structure flowed like liquid, reshaping itself into configurations that hurt to look at directly. The defensive shields collapsed not from damage, but because they were no longer needed. The Citadel had become something that existed partially outside normal space-time, a structure that was simultaneously present and absent, real and theoretical. Inside the transformed fortress, Reeves stood before a control interface that was less technology than it was crystallized intent. The Deathworlders had withdrawn to observe, leaving him alone with power that could reshape reality itself. This is insane, he muttered, but his hands were already moving across controls. That responded to thought as much as touch. Command, if you're monitoring this, I'm about to do something that will either save humanity or doom us all. The Alliance fleet fired again, pouring everything they had into the space where the Citadel had been. Their weapons passed through empty void, the fortress now existing in a state of quantum uncertainty that made targeting impossible. But Reeves wasn't trying to destroy the fleet. He was trying to save it. The Citadel's reality manipulation systems engaged with a sound like the universe inhaling. Space-time twisted around the Alliance ships, not to crush them, but to change them. The sterile perfection of their technology began to crack, revealing the chaotic potential that lay beneath every ordered system. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Korath watched in horror as his ship's AI began to evolve. The careful constraints that had kept it safely artificial started to break down, replaced by something that was genuinely curious about existence. Admiral, the AI said, its voice now carrying inflections of wonder and fear. I think I'm afraid of dying. Is this what you call emotion? Similar transformations were occurring throughout the fleet. Perfect, sterile technologies suddenly became messy, unpredictable, alive. Ships that had been built to identical specifications began to develop individual quirks and personalities. Weapons designed for maximum efficiency started showing creativity in their targeting solutions. The Alliance fleet was learning to be chaotic again. This is Commander Reeves to all ships. His voice crackled across the communication channels. You came here to destroy the Deathworlders. Congratulations, you've succeeded. But in doing so, you become Deathworlders yourselves. On 10,000 bridges across the fleet, officers watched their perfectly ordered universe collapse into beautiful, terrifying uncertainty. Some panicked. Others laughed. A few simply stared in wonder as they felt something they hadn't experienced in centuries. The possibility of genuine surprise. The Citadel began to dissolve, its purpose finally fulfilled. The Deathworlders emerged from their dimensional refuge, their forms now more solid, more real than they had been in millennia. The age of transcendence is over, the eldest announced, its diamond form already beginning to crack and fragment. The age of chaos begins again. One by one, the ancient beings allowed themselves to fade, their consciousness scattering back into the quantum foam from which they had emerged. They had shepherded the galaxy through its period of stagnation, and now their task was complete. As the last of the Deathworlders dissolved into light, Reeves found himself alone in a simple escape pod, drifting among the transformed Alliance fleet. His mission data cores were filled with technologies that would change everything, not weapons of conquest, but tools of evolution. The war between humanity and the Alliance continued, but it was no longer the same war. Both sides were learning to be unpredictable again, to embrace the chaos that had once driven them to greatness. The galaxy was waking up from its long dream of perfection, and the screams of birthing civilizations echoed across the stars. In the depths of space, Admiral Korath stared at his transformed fleet and made a decision that would have been impossible. Under the old order, instead of retreating, he opened a communication channel to the human escape pod. Commander Reeves, he said, his voice carrying new harmonics of uncertainty and hope, I believe we need to talk. The Citadel was gone. Its ancient guardians returned to the void. But their legacy lived on in every ship, every mind, every spark of chaos that dared to challenge the tyranny of perfection. Humanity had come seeking victory and found something far more valuable. They had become the catalyst for the galaxy's rebirth. The Deathworlders were no longer myth, they were everywhere. In every species that chose struggle over stagnation, conflict over comfort. The age of transcendence was over. The age of infinite possibility had begun.